Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing with our weekly series of shirim on the Zohar HaKadosh, connecting the Torah HaKadosh of Moshe Rabbeinu and the Eish HaKodesh of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai to be Mechaber Moshe and Rashbi, to be Mechaber Chachma and Bina, the Shir Na'im of Rabbeinu, and the L'chu Chazu, the two introductions that Rabbi Nachman has to Likutei Moharan, which is the love song for Moshe Rabbeinu and the Gilui about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, because the way to properly understand the Torah of Rabbi Nachman and the way to properly understand all of Pnimiyas HaTorah is to start with Moshe Rabbeinu and then to draw it down into Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and the secret of Kedai Lismoch, and from there to draw it down to the Nachal Nevei Mokar Chachma to give us life. Now, in this week's Parsha, there are a number of beautiful, beautiful Zoharim. Obviously, when it comes to the Akedah, when it comes to the process of Pesach Ha'el Kacham Hayom, there's an Arichos of the Medrash HaNe'elam about Rabbi Akiva receiving from Rabbi Eliezer. But we're going to focus on is an idea that's not necessarily explicit within the Zohar HaKadosh, but it does emerge out of the text when read in the spirit of this concept. And it's an idea that's very often brought in the name of the Sfas Emes, and it was popularized and kind of really developed in the writings of Rav Moshe Shapiro, Zchus Yagen Aleinu, and his Talmidim, with regards to the orientation and the difference between Eastern wisdom, so to speak, and the Torah itself. That there was a notion and a question as to why so many Yidden and why the neshama seems so drawn, ismashech, why the neshama seems so drawn after certain wisdoms that developed in the Eastern hemispheres of civilization, mindfulness, awakening, paths towards spirituality that have everything to do with trying to shut down the mind, to open oneself up to the possibility of paying attention and living in the presence. And all of these teachings that are so clearly revealed in our Svarim HaKadoshim, nevertheless, there was very often a reality that for the Jewish people to be malaket, these nitzotzin, for the Jewish people to draw out the baseline or the stability upon which to build intentionality or mindfulness or attunement to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the vessels that seem to work with it, many Jews found themselves going east, looking at different spiritual paths to try and elevate processes. And you have very often in the history of Klal Yisrael individuals who went down that path and drew out kelim niflaim in order to be mamshich, the real avodah of avodas Hashem. But what remains is there continues to be an element of a rootedness or a desire and a connectivity to wisdom of the East, so to speak, which has been translated and brought out from its original context, but nevertheless, certain practices, certain intentionalities, certain points of focus and step off points that really determine the whole system still remain kind of at conflict at the heart of what the Torah is saying, and in terms of what it means to cultivate mindfulness and what it means to properly be a person with attention. And one of the reasons given from the Sfas Emes and brought out from different places, especially based on the system of Rav Tzadok HaKohen Melublin and the Gra, and Rav Kook spent a lot of time processing this as well. But Avram Avinu had the Bnei Keturah. Avram Avinu had a number of children from Keturah, which ultimately were sent east. They were sent eastwards, and Avram Avinu gave them gifts. And the gifts that Avram Avinu gave them were shemos, shemos that were not shalem, shemos betuma, certain spiritual forces, spiritual awakening, spiritual identification, spiritual focus that does not necessarily lead to the full culmination of the spiritual vision, which was the secret that Avraham Avinu gave over to Yitzchak, and Yitzchak gave over to Yaakov, and Yaakov gave over to the Shvatim, and from the Shvatim to us. The differentiation, and very often it might appear to be a hair's breadth of a differentiation, but nevertheless, that hair's breadth is the linchpin that maintains the entire systematicity of what it means for us to approach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so we see in this week's Parsha that there's going to be an orientation back to this Bnei Kedem, back to this place of those Eastern spiritual promises that come about rooted in the trajectory of Avram Avinu's gifts that he sent there, that nevertheless can be utilized to one degree or another, but ultimately the differentiation has to be made when it comes to actual Avodah, because when it comes to the differentiation, that hair's breadth of the differentiation of the Bnei Keturah and the Chachma of the Bnei Kedem, and that Eastern orientation, so to speak, towards spiritual practices and the Hapshatas HaInyanim, which very often seem to be disconnected from the roots upon which they're rooted, but very often the roots continue to express themselves, and therefore some of the ideas become problematic because of the rootedness that they take shape in. But nevertheless, there's a clarification that the Zohar Kadosh gives us over here in terms of where that wisdom came from and what the avodah is to try and do now when we find ourselves with the ability to connect to the Torah HaKadosh. So we're going to be looking in the Zohar Kadosh, and this is going to be Tzadi on Daf Tzadi Tes Amud Beis in Parshas Vayera. And we're looking not in the Medrash and Elam, but we're looking in the Zohar Kadosh. And Be'ezras Hashem, we'll see and we'll try, based on the Balasulam, to see how this reading of the Zohar Kadosh becomes very relevant for us, especially in terms of how we understand and identify kind of certain spiritual concepts like the cultivation of desire and attunement. And there's very fine and fundamental distinctions that must be made in any attempt to engage with spiritual practice that gets clarified in the Zohar Kadosh, or at least gets referenced to and is a good source text to kind of illuminate the path. So the Zohar Kadosh is discussing the reality of life and death, presence and absence, transition, beginning again. And the Zohar Kadosh is speaking of a certain type of relationship in the sense that that which is awoken below and the Mayim Nukvin and the desire that a person has down here below is going to be the thing that creates the shefa and the influx of spirituality into their lives that comes down from above. So in accordance with how we function below is going to be the awakening above. Kigavna deihu amshich alaihu bahai alma. Hachi is mashaches lebasar denafik minai. And in this element of the Zohar, it's still speaking about the work that a person does in this world and the reward or the reaction that they're going to have in the next world. So it's speaking about a differentiation of life and afterlife. But it's saying that in terms of what a person wants to draw down for themselves, so it should be understood that it's in accordance with what a person does. So Zak Tehillah Zohar Kadosh. Tachazi, come and see. I barnash is mashich basar kudshabrichu v'teuvta dilei abasrei bahai alma. Lebasar kadnafik minai ihu is mashich abasrei v'yahavin lei oirich leistakla le'ela basar hahu mashichu de is mashich beruusa kol yumei dahei alma. So it's a very, very beautiful, beautiful element of the Zohar that's expressed at the Idrazuta, where it says about Rashbi, B'chad Ketira Aktarina, that I had a singular desire for you. But the Zohar Kadosh is saying, come and see, we know that in accordance with the desire that a person has towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the yearning that one has after HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world, so too is going to be the response after a person leaves this world. They're going to be drawn after the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and a path is going to be cleared for them to be able to behold that which they desired so deeply and yearned afterwards with all of their desire each moment of their lives. So again, the Zohar HaKadosh is highlighting this beautiful, beautiful orientation of in accordance with what a person is thinking about and desiring, so too is going to be the gift that's drawn down afterwards. And the avodah, obviously, is to uncover the gift within the desire towards the gift itself. So here we have something amazing. Amar Rav Abba. Amar Rav Abba. And it's important for us to understand why it's Rav Abba who's saying this. Rav Abba was the scribe of Rabbi Shimon. Rav Abba understood the significance of listening to the words of the tzaddik and writing down the words of the tzaddik and knowing what the tzaddik was saying and not necessarily finding oneself in accordance with whatever the spiritual fancy of their heart might be. But Rav Abba had the secret of the bittul of chachma, the light of the tzaddik, and he had the ability to be mitzamsem, the words of his Rebbe, to draw it down so that it can be a real system that can be worked upon. So it's Rav Abba specifically who's going to be leading us into this story where we ultimately see the importance of the difference being made between the wisdom of the East and the Torah. Amar Rav Abba, Yumachad, one day, Arna Bechad Masa Me'inun Tahave Me B'nei Kedem. One day I found myself in the town that was populated by those who came from the East, B'nei Kedem, those earlier generations. But Amruli, and what did they say to me? Mehahi chachmasa dahave yadin meyuma kadmai. They spoke to me of the wisdom that they knew from the original ancient days. Vahave ishkachin safrin de chachmasa dilhon vekrivu li chad sifra. And they showed me a library of the books of their wisdom, and they brought a particular book in front of me. And what was written in that book was as follows: in accordance with the desire that a person cultivates in their mind and the attentional attitude that they cultivate in their heart in this world, that in accordance with that, it's going to draw down a shefa from above. That's a mirror image of the desire that a person has. But over here, we see that it's not talking about afterlife and after death. We see that it's not talking about star and onish. We see that it's speaking far more about an active participation in the process of the cultivation of a desire, and in accordance with the desire that a person cultivates down in this world, so too theoretically there can be manifest from above that which a person has a desire for. So it's showing in a very clear but non-defined way the inherent connection between the desire that one cultivates in this world and the capacity for that desire to manifest, so to speak, as a result of the desire. And again, we're saying that this is what's written in the book of the Bnei Kedem. This is what Rav Abba is seeing. That in accordance with what a person has kavana on, ichavin be b'hei alma, hachi amshich alayhu ruach me'le'ela, ki gavne da hahud reusa de iskavik be. And so too, in accordance with the valence of the thought or the desire or that expression that the person connects themselves to, so too is going to be what they're connected to. Ura usa ichon b'mila iloy kadisha, iu amshech alayu lahahi mila mela lagabe. If a person contemplates and focuses intently on the secret of something good, so then as a result of the contemplation of that good thing, so to speak, there can be a manifestation, so to speak, from above to below of that thing that a person is thinking about. And so too, because it's a mixed bag and it's just a technological usage of kavana without the purpose at the heart of kavana, which is the kavana, which is the tachlis of what I'm paying attention to and not simply how I pay attention. And if I think about something negative, as the Bnei Kedem write, so then I'll draw down that negative thing to me. It sounds very similar to this type of manifestation orientation thinking, that as a result of my thoughts, I draw down a like-minded response, a certain co-creation that reveals a mirroring of reflection. And all of that might be true in the secret of Hashgacha Pratis, but it's not because the mind is paying attention. It's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created a mechanism within the mind that when I'm mevatel my mind to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends down a shefa, but it has nothing to do with my ratzon. The only ratzon that I have is to be a mevatel my ratzon legamre to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as opposed to this Bnei Kedem, which is far more about orienting my ratzon and choosing what it is that I want, etc., etc. The Imre, the Ikra de Milsa, and they also said over there, says Rabbi Abba, the Ikra de Milsa Talia b'milin be'uvde uber'usa istavka, that the main thing depends upon the words that one says and the actions and the desires that one has towards connectivity. Ubeda ismashech mela ela letata hahu sitra de istavikba, and it's specifically through the awakening from below and the desire from below that's going to awaken and draw down that thing from above. Again, speaking in a language of that manifestation orientation that's inherent within the books of the East. And a person has the ability to orient themselves to the secrets of the koichavim and the mazalos, to manipulate and to utilize the energy, so to speak, of the teva itself, which is just a halbasha on the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's written over there, all of the different iterations and all of the different rules and regulations as to how to draw down that which a person wants to draw down for themselves. So again, reiterating this profound power of that in accordance with the desire that I have, all I have to do is want enough. All I have to do is manifest my desire enough. And then Memela, the Bnei Kedem say, somehow, some way, that orientation is going to reveal that everything that I need is exactly where I have, because there's no purpose of going out and searching for anything, v'chule, v'chule. V'havei Amrei, and the Bnei Kedem continue to say, Kama de barnas ishmache b'haya alma hachinami mishachin le kanafik mehaya alma. They also had speech and words about that which takes place in the future, that when a person leaves this world, it's going to be in accordance with what they did in this world, and that's going to be the path that they follow, that karma path. B'mad istavik b'haya alma v'ismashech habaisrei hachi istavik b'hu alma iba kudsha b'kudsha iba misaba de misaba, and how it's going to be just a result of the energy that a person put out in this world, so to speak, is going to be the energy that they meet in response. Again, all of this is from the language of the Bnei Kedem, the Shemos of Tuma. If a person merits to connect themselves to Kedusha, so then they become part of that celestial kingdom, and they become part of the system in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself. And again, there was this desire to become like a malach, because it's only the Yid who understands the secret that a Ben Adam is much higher than a malach. The emptiness of the mind allows a person to live a life like a malach, that it's removed from this worldliness because there's no possessions and there's no anything, because it's emptiness. So a person has to live a life of completely shamayim, and they want to become like a malach. This is again the secret of the Bnei Kedem. And it's the secret of a person almost becoming like a malach. This is what they're seeing in Bnei Kedem. But it's so too, it works the same way in the opposite of holiness, that if a person tries to manifest a connection to something negative and they send their energy, so to speak, out to a negative place, and a person becomes the thing that they're thinking about, because if the person's desire has some kayach of its own, as the Bnei Kedem say, which is a kfira, because the desire is no kayach of its own. The desire is just a makom of bittul that's mamshech l'koyach from lamala mimenu, which is the secret of the Orient Sof that's mashpia lamata within nishmas yisrael. But it's not because the ratzon has a koyach. The ratzon is a bittul. That's the secret of the Torah Kadosha. Bnei Kedem feel that the ratzon has a koyach, and therefore wherever the ratzon is directing itself, it's going to have the ability to adapt and become that which it is, because it identifies so much with the ratzon. It's the opposite of the bittul of the ratzon to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the attempt to manifest that which I desire. It's the attempt to bring about that which I desire, as opposed to letting go of desire and giving in to the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that rests at the core of all things. And if a person, according to the Bnei Kedem, spends so much time thinking about these negative things, so then when they leave this world, they're going to be drawn into Gehenna. It's a place of destruction. It's a place of desolation. It's a place of desolation. Now, Zakt the Heiliger of Abba, after hearing all of these teachings, after seeing all of the wisdom of the East, after seeing all of it, Rav Abba says as follows: Amina loin banai krivu da lemilan da araisa. And I'm going to tell you, says Rav Abba, these words are very, very close to the words of the Torah. These words are very, very close to the words of the Torah. Aval islechu leisrachka migoy me'inun sifrin. But a person has to distance themselves from these books. A person has to distance themselves from these forms of wisdom. A book is an expression of a wisdom that melts into reality and becomes a climate in reality. It's a way of thinking. B'sefer, b'sefer, b'sefer. The book is the mind itself. So when a person has to be misrachik from these books, it means to be misrachik from these ideas. Rav Abba says, yes, it looks very karov. It looks very similar to the light of the Torah. But the way to relate to these svarim is to distance oneself from them. Begin the lo yaste libaychu leilin pulchinum ulechol inin sitrim. The ka'amar hacha. A person should distance themselves from these books so that their heart not be drawn after the paths and the actions that are associated with the practices inherent within these books, and all of the different circuitous routes and paths that ultimately come about. Dilma chas v'shalom lo tistoin mebasar pulchona de kutshabrichu. Because heaven forbid, a person will, as a result of going down too far in that path, they'll distance themselves from the path of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The hakol svarim ilun itayin loin lebnei nasha begin de bnei kedem chachim habe. Because in truth, these books of emptiness, these books that proclaim that there's an emptiness in the Welt and that there's a real tzimtzum, and that if there's an emptiness in the Welt, God forbid, then the only thing that a person can do is mimic the Welt, which is to become empty as well, and to not attempt to possess and to not attempt to acquire, because any attempt at acquisition or relation or you joining is just an inevitability of pain that will cause more suffering as a result of the attachments, as the Bnei Kedem say. the pessimistic science that sees emptiness as the only thing that is real, and as a result, the only way to relate to emptiness is from a removed position of non-judgmentality. It looks smart. It looks like Chachma, says Rababa. It looks very wise, but it's as far from the daytime of Torah as the nighttime of this place. Because this path leads to emptiness, as opposed to the path of the Torah, which is a path of fullness. The Torah is a path of fullness. The Torah is a path of radical affirmation and positive affirmation. The Torah is not non-judgmental. The Torah is profoundly judgmental, as Rabbi Nachman is masbir in the Nekuda Shekolel Sakol in Reish Pei Beis of finding a Nekuda Tova. Avram Avinu was the opposite of this pessimism. Avram Avinu was the radical optimism of the radical choice to say Baruch Sha'amar V'Haya Ha'olam. As the Zohar Kadosh introduces this entire conversation about these Bnei Kedem, so the language over there was to begin the Kad Barnash Ihu B'Haya Alma Loi Ishkach V'Loi Istakel Al Mai Ka'im Ela Kol Yuma V'Yuma Chashiv Ki'luhu Azil Berekana, in preparation to teach us about the problem with the Bnei Kedem. The Zohar Kadosh says, don't be like those people who are not paying attention and not standing upon the true secret, because each and every day they think about nothingness in this world as if they're walking in rekana, in emptiness. The Akad Nishmas Nafkes Mehai Alma Lo Yodislan Lo Urche Salka Loda Urcha Salka Leila. Because a person who orients themselves towards emptiness is going to find emptiness. That emptiness is that orientation to the Bnei Kedem that speak of a non-judgmental passivity in the face of utter suffering and emptiness. The opposite of tzimtzum shalok kipshuto. That's a mahalach of tzimtzum kipshuto. And Rav Abba sees and he's hearing this looks similar, but then he says, you know what I understand? What I understand is that the reason a person has to stay away from these books is because people can be drawn away as a result of these books. Begin the Bnei Kedem chachim and hava. They had chachma. They had chachma, they had bittul, they had emptiness, but they had no bina. They had no ability to draw the light of Torah down into the heart. They had no ability to draw it down into saying yes to the world of Baruch Sha'amar V'Haya Ha'olam. V'Yerusa de Chachma da Yarsume Avram. This Chachma that they had, they received from Avram Avinu. They received from him. The Yahav Lebnei Plagshim that Avram Avinu gave to the Pilegesh, to the Peleg shame, to the half of a shame, to half of the picture, to the emptiness that is right. That bittul is necessary in order to bring about the yeshus amiti of Hakadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol, and to say yes to the Metzias and to become a shliach. They only got half of the picture. But Avram Avinu gave them those gifts of that emptiness, that man, that preparatory stage of emptying the mind, but that only comes about to bring about something good when it fills its mind afterwards with the secret of Yitzchak, but not like the Bnei Kedem, who are just empty, that proclaim a certain posture of emptiness. This is what it means that Avram gave them gifts. And they sent them away from Yitzchak, which is the secret of Bina, which is the secret of drawing down the Chachma of Bittul into the Kalim themselves of Avoida, and that's the Tzimtzum that Rabbi Abba is able to be Megala. But Idenu Chai, Kodme El Eretz Kedem, he sent them over there. He sent them there, and those are where those books come from. Ulabasar Ishmachu Mehahu Chachma Lakam Sitrin, and then that wisdom expanded in many, many paths, and therefore a person can no longer lay claim to the inner kernel of that, because it's only a peleg shem. It's only the half of the story, which is the tzimtzum shabo, without the giloi shabo. It's the awakening to the emptiness without the emergence of the fullness. Because then a person gets intoxicated on an emptiness, and they think, okay, non-attachment, passivity, non-judgmental, and then a person can become empty their whole life. Adarabba, the Ipcha Mistabra, our job is to fill the world. Pru Ru Muluas Aretz. The Bris Milah is the Hisgalus of radical acceptance of the condition of the world with the radical belief that there is an inherent meaning at the heart of each and everything, the opposite of emptiness. The opposite of emptiness. Aval Zora di Yitzchak Chulka di Yaakov Lav Hachidachsiv. Lav Hachidachsiv. Yitzchak Yaakov, the Torah that comes down in the real way from Avraham Avinu, it's not the same thing. Because over there, it wasn't just half the picture. We didn't just get the tzabrachin. We didn't just get the emptiness. We didn't just get the recognition that this world is a shver place. Because over there, by us, v'yitin Avram es koyel asher lo li Yitzchak, he gave us everything. Bas hayela Avram b'kol shema, it was everything. The secret of the Nun Shari Bina, the Memta Shari Bina with the Shah Nun within it, the Yichud of Chachma and Bina, the ability to draw down that infinite awareness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the practicality of vessels and not to get stuck in the emptiness of it all, in the emptiness of the Tzimtzum, which proclaims emptiness and disavows acquisition. Avram Avinu is Koine Shemayim. Avram Avinu is all about acquisition. It's all about owning. It's all about creating vessels for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, drawing down the light of the infinite into this world itself. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Koine Shemayim Va'aretz, because Avram Avinu gave him that name of Hashem Tzavakos. We get everything. We don't just get half the picture. This is the secret of faith. The secret of faith is the only thing that can answer that question of reikanus, that emptiness, that is proclaimed by Bnei Kedem. The only fulfillment that comes to it is the Demehimnusa, faith, the istavik be Avram, that Avram connected to. He connected to it. There was something real there. V'nafik me'ahu adva, me'ahu sitra Yaakov, and Yaakov Avinu comes here. The Gilui of Yaakov, Shiftei Ka, the Gilui of Nishmas Yisrael, Mashiach Tzidkenu, Machsiv Be, V'hine Hashem Nitzav Alav. Hashem is right there. It's not a peleg shame. It's not emptiness. It's not rekonus. It's radical affirmation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence right here, right now. Va'ata Yaakov Avdi, and Yaakov, you are my servant. Begine kach boile lebarnash le'esmasha basar kudshabrichu le'estavik be'tadir. A person has to be perpetually connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, perpetually. D'chsivu boi tidva. Because it says that a person should come and connect directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu by way of his creation, by way of his Torah, by way of his mitzvos. So we have a very delicate but fundamental cut that's being made between the Chachma of the Bnei Kedem, which is a Groisa Chachma. It's the Chachma of emptiness, but it's only half the picture. And it becomes intoxicating if a person only grabs that half of the picture, because the emptiness proclaims a certain life of non-acquisition, non-acquittal, of not engaging, of being mavatal myself, and it fits. The Jewish mind wants something like this. It's a gift from Avraham Avinu. It sounds familiar. But Rav Abba said now it's too delicate because a person might get taken off path as a result of that, and they'll lose out on the second point, which is the fulfillment that comes about afterwards. We have to wait until after the Maror. We can't be like the German in Rabbi Nachman's story who only eats the Maror and then runs out and says, this world is bitter, this world is empty. The Jew says to him, you fool, you should have waited for after the Maror. If we wait a little bit after the Maror, we're going to come to find Shulchan Aruch, we're going to come to eat a feast, and the Suda is Gevena Suda. And it might not be as beautiful as the libraries of Bnei Kedem. Rav Abba saw it. He says, this is close. But Rav Abba, the secret of Chachma, the secret of receiving from the panim of the tzaddik himself, to understand the difference, to be makabel from the das of the tzaddik, to know the difference between the notion that the mind has a power of its own, God forbid, and the real notion which the mind has no power of its own other than coming to recognize that it has no power of its own. And when the mind recognizes that it has no power of its own, it becomes a shliach for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But not chas v'shalom that there's a yeshus in the machshava. Thinking does nothing. Thinking is a segula for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be mashpia, machshavos tovos melamala, into our mind. It's not because my mind has any capacity. And that's the difference. Kol asher lo, Yitzchak Avinu lives with the schoik, the kedusha of knowing I don't do anything. I don't manifest anything. My feet are in the air, my head is on the ground, I know nothing. I'm doing somersaults in this world. I have no koach. And then from that place, we learn how to act. We learn how to take on the levush of Yitzchak and Yaakov and Shivtei Ka and affirm reality. But not, God forbid, to rely on the Bnei Kedem, that secret of thinking I know anything and coming to a place of rekanusa, of emptiness, because there's nothing and I don't grasp anything. And then a person falls into this bittul, and the only thing left when a person falls into a false sense of bittul is the self, and it becomes a self-obsession, and it becomes this attempt to manifest the mind and to create the destiny of one's own self within their mind. Adrabba ibcha mastabra. There's a secret of Shavisi Hashem Negation. There's a secret of Yishav Adas. There's a secret of his batlus and his shtavus hagemura, but these are dargan and bittul. They're not dargan in hasaga. The mind is not looking to grasp hasaga. Nevuah will be niskala when we can properly be mevatel ourselves. But when we think that our minds are capable of receiving nevuah without the bittul, then we're running to the chachma without the bina, or we're taking the bina without the chachma, depending on how you're looking at it, and we're missing the point, and we're falling back into the Bnei Kedem, into that immature spiritual perspective of an all-inclusive nothingness that leads to nothing, and that doesn't give anything for me to build myself upon, but rather to uncover the secret of the chachma hapnimis, which is the radical affirmation that yesh lismoch, there's something that I can grab hold of. I can build a palace of meaning here. That's the radical mission of Avraham Avinu, not falling back into the emptiness and the disavowal of meaning, God forbid, but rather ein shum yesh b'olam klal. This is what Rabbeinu was sha'ag b'kol gadol, because it's a perpetual fight against the Bnei Kedem. It's a perpetual fight of being sucked into that vacuum of emptiness and the lack of connection and the desire to just kind of sit idly by and not engage and not share and not participate and not say yes to the world and not invest and not to get into it and not to feel it and not to be present in each and every moment of it. There's a natural tendency. The mind is afraid of that. The mind is afraid of that place sometimes. And so we have a tendency to be like the Bnei Kedem that want to just be mevatel ourselves in the reiknusa of it all, and the emptiness of it all. But that's only half of the picture. The fullness of the picture, the shleimus hagemura, is the bittul for the sake of hashlama that comes afterwards. Because avada we have nothing, but once we recognize we have nothing, then Hakadosh Baruch Hu is mashlim, and Hakadosh Baruch Hu is mashpia his light down into the secret of the Ma'aser Merkava, where the ish themselves becomes a Merkava for Hakadosh Baruch Hu, and the secret of ha'avos heim heim hamerkava. The avos heim heim hamerkava is the fact that chesed, gvura, and tiferes, which are the midos, the avos of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, heim heim hamerkava, that through the process of being mamshech, more mochen down, through the gradations of bittul, but not through the self-assertion of will, but rather the negation of will, and the mesiras nefesh, and the throwing myself with abandonment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desire, not my own desire. So in that place, what happens is the chagas are oile, and that the tippy top of the chagas, the kelim elyonim, become the kli for a new chabad. They become the chabad. So the self becomes moichin, meaning to say we reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu within us. That's the secret of the Ma'aser Merkava of the Avos HaKadoshim. It's not that there's nothing, there's a Metzius, and that Metzius is mevatel itself to such a degree that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is misgala and mashra himself and Shechina on the Avos HaKadoshim through the element of Bittul Muchletes, the secret of the Tzaddik Emes, the opposite of Reiknusa. It's fullness, because the Tzaddik has gotten out of themselves. There's no desire. There's only the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in that place, we're makasha ourselves to the Darga of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and we're merachik ourselves from that which Rabbi Abba, the Chachma HaPnimis, is able to determine once it receives from the mouth of the tzaddik what it needs to remove itself from, and it's the ikar path of bittul versus this path that kind of continuously leads to an affirmation of the self that is rooted in a desire to have some actual koach, to have some actual impact. It's only when I realize that I have no impact, I have no koach, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows me to live with the secret of pretending that I have koach, and the secret of the wooden sword of the Ma'aser Mevitachon, and the secret of avodah l'tzarach kavoa, but not that avodah l'tzarach kavoa actually means anything. Rahmana litzlan mehaydai. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs nothing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs nothing to reveal everything. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Rachamim Rabim, and he can be Megala everything through the mitos of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and we don't have to make recourse to the Bnei Kedem, and we can find the light of Emunah, the secret of the Mehem Nusa, the Kula, that's Mashlim, the Reikanusa, the Kol, and that's the secret of Hashem, Berachas Avram Bakol, and Avram gives that Kol to Yitzchak and to Yaakov, and each of us have that in the secret of Yosef HaTzadik, which is the Shmira of the Bris, which is the Midah of Kol, Shemachaber, Shmaya Va'arya, and that's the secret of the radical affirmation of the hyper-essentiality at the heart of all things, and the Bittul Muchlekas of Yosef HaTzadik, where he's Mevatel himself in Gansen, and it's only there that he becomes the interpreter of dreams. And Be'ezras Hashem, we should be Zoicha to the words of Reb Abba, to run directly into the waters of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, to run from the waters of Bnei Kedem, not because it's bad, but because there's so much better that waits for a person in the waters of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And in that sense, we could be Mekayim the words of the Zohar Kadosh, that Mehai Safri Afkin Megilusa Barachamim, when we find the light of radical acceptance plus radical affirmation at the same point from the Zohar Kadosh itself. That's the secret of Geula, Be'ezras Hashem.